Hi there. You are about to begin a course on how English sounds are made and how they work together. It is called Phonetics and Phonology of English. If you have ever been curious about pronunciation or accents, you are in the right place. Let us start with the objectives. By the end of the course, you will be able to 1. Explain how phonetic sounds of English are produced, transmitted, and perceived. 2. You will be able to identify and describe the functions of the speech organs. 3. You will be able to explain the phoneme concepts, phonetic units, phonemic patterning, and phonological constraints in English. 4. You will be able to identify the structure and types of syllables in English. 5. You will be able to identify the types of stress, accent, and intonation in English and their functions. 6. You will be able to identify and describe the various phonological processes in English. Let us take our first objective of the course. In this lesson, we are going to talk about the production, transmission, and perception of speech sounds. First of all, let me ask you, what is sound? Sounds are noises or any audible representation. Basically, we are saying that sounds are the noises that we hear. When someone claps, you hear a sound or you hear a noise. When someone screams, you hear a noise. When someone speaks, you hear a noise. When there is a loud splash, you hear a noise. So sounds are the noises or any audible representation. This means that we cannot talk about sounds without talking about the sense of hearing. Your ear is involved when speech sounds are concerned. The next question is that how are these sounds produced? Sounds are made when the air around us is disturbed, thereby creating sound waves that are transmitted in the air. Whenever the air around us is disturbed, it creates sound waves. That is what we see in the picture marked in blue. These sound waves are transmitted through air and finally received by our ear. This is how sounds are made, through the disturbance of the air around us. Now that we know the meaning of sounds and how sounds are made, let us ask, what is phonetics? When we say phonetics, it is the study of speech sounds. We already know how sounds are produced, but what about speech sounds? How are speech sounds produced? Before you can produce a speech sound, you need an organ of speech. These organs of speech will help you to articulate the speech sounds. That is the first thing that you need in order to produce a speech sound, the organs of speech. We will talk about these organs of speech in our subsequent lessons. When you utilize these organs of speech to produce a sound, the sound travels through a medium, and this medium is air. The sound travels through air, so the disturbance in the transmission of the sound through air will create what we call sound waves, and these sound waves are transmitted through air into our ear. This is how speech sounds are produced. It is produced by the organs of speech, and then it is transmitted through air and it reaches our ear in the form of sound waves. There are two major ways of analyzing speech sounds. One is phonetics and two is phonology. You must understand these two important concepts, phonetics and phonology. Let us talk about these two concepts in detail. The first one is phonetics. This studies how speech sounds are produced, transmitted, and perceived. So these are the three main things that are considered when phonetics is concerned. So phonetics is the study of how we produce sounds, how it is transmitted, and how it is perceived. Or in other words, we can say that phonetics covers the full journey of sound from your mouth to someone's ears. That is phonetics, the study of how sounds are produced, how sounds are transmitted, and how sounds are perceived. Let us talk about the areas of phonetics. The first area of phonetics is articulatory phonetics, and this is the study of the production of speech sounds. The key word here is production. So when we say articulatory phonetics, we are dealing with how speech sounds are produced. So it studies the movements of the tongue, the shape of the mouth, and the use of vocal cords, all the physical actions involved in speaking. This tells us that in studying articulatory phonetics, we are concerned with the speech organs because they are responsible for the production of speech sounds. That is articulatory phonetics, the study of the production of speech sounds. What is the second area of phonetics? That is what we call acoustic phonetics. This is the field of phonetics that is concerned with the physical properties of the speech sounds once they have been produced. This branch is more technical. It deals with the physical properties of sounds. When we say physical properties of sounds, then we are talking about the physics of sound waves, frequency, pitch, duration after the sound has been produced. This is where speech meets science. When we delve into acoustic phonetics, you would understand that this is more of physics. The third area of phonetics is what is called auditory phonetics. This is the branch of phonetics that studies speech sounds from the viewpoint of the listener. So finally, this one looks at sound from the listener's point of view. It studies how our ears receive the sound and how our brain processes and interprets it. So to recap, phonetics is the production, transmission, and perception of sounds. It involves your organs of speech. Phonetics include articulatory phonetics, acoustic phonetics, and auditory phonetics. Each of these plays a key role in helping us understand speech as both a physical and mental process. Let us take articulatory phonetics and study it in detail. Let's now take a closer look at articulatory phonetics, the part of phonetics that focuses on how we physically produce speech sounds. We have already talked about how speech sounds are produced. All speech sounds are the results of some form of modification or obstruction to a stream of air in the upper respiratory tract. This is the upper respiratory tract. You can take a good look at the diagram to get a picture of how the air moves. All speech sounds begin as a stream of air coming from the lungs. Whenever you produce any speech sound, there is an obstruction of the stream of air in the upper respiratory tract. For example, if you pronounce p or e, there is an obstruction of the air coming out from your lungs. The air doesn't just come out freely. It is shaped and changed as it passes through different parts of the vocal tract. Then the stream of air escapes from the lungs and passes along the vocal tract. So the stream of air accumulated in the lungs will pass along the vocal tract. So it will pass through the larynx, it will pass through the pharynx, then it will move on to the oral cavity or the nasal cavity. So for example, if you pronounce this sound you could see that there is obstruction of air coming out from the oral cavity, and therefore it forces the air to pass through your nose. That is what we call nasal sounds. So whenever the stream of air passes through the nose instead of passing through the oral cavity, we make a nasal sound. The pressure of the air that is built up in the vocal cords makes the vocal cords vibrate, and then these vibrations are transmitted by the stream of air to reach the human ear. After hearing the sound, it is then carried to the brain and perceived by the person as voice. In a nutshell, there is an airflow through the lungs to the vocal tract, and then there is some obstruction of the airflow which causes the vibration of the air, and these vibrations are transmitted through the stream of air to the human ear. After the person hears whatever the sound is, it is then carried to the brain to be perceived by the person as voice. The process of voice production is what is called. Now, whenever we say articulatory phonetics, that is the production of speech sounds, there are 7 main organs that are responsible for articulation, that is the production of speech sounds. What are these 7 articulators? 1 is the pharynx, 2 the soft palate or velum, 3 the hard palate or roof of the mouth, 4 the alveolar ridge, 5 the tongue, 6 the teeth, and then the last one is the lips. So all these articulators are responsible for producing speech sounds. So take note that in order to produce a speech sound, you will need all these organs to be present and to be functioning properly. That is articulatory phonetics, how speech sounds are produced. Let us talk about acoustic phonetics, that is the study of the physical properties of speech sounds. We are going to talk about the properties of speech sounds once the sound has been produced. To make this easier, let us break it down into 5 key terms. One is what is called frequency. So this is the rate of variation in air pressure in a sound. What we mean here is that frequency refers to how fast the air is vibrating when a sound is made. Think of frequency as the speed of sound waves, and frequency is measured in hertz. And the most basic or starting frequency in a sound is what is called fundamental frequency. So generally, high-pitched sounds like, let's say, whistle have high frequency, and low-pitched sounds like drum have low frequency. So frequency here refers to how fast the air is vibrating when a sound is made. What about amplitude? Amplitude is the distance between the rest point and the top or bottom point of a wave within which air particles move. What does this mean? It simply means that amplitude is how big the sound wave is. So it is the height of the wave. So imagine a wave in the ocean. Small waves will be equal to soft sounds, right? And big waves will give us loud sound. Amplitude helps us to understand the loudness or the strength of a sound. That is why this is underlined. So amplitude that is, how big a sound wave is, helps us to understand the loudness or the strength of a sound. This is also another physical property of acoustic phonetics. Another one is intensity, and this refers to the amount of acoustic energy present in a sound. So intensity is related to amplitude, but it refers more specifically to the amount of energy in the sound. A loud shout will have more intensity than a soft whisper. So more energy, more intensity, louder sound. What about duration? When we say duration, it is very simple. It means the length of time that a sound lasts or travels. For example, the vowel sound in the word sheep is held longer than the vowel in the word ship. One is E and the other is A. So it means that duration helps us to distinguish between similar sounds in different words. How long a sound lasts is what is referred to as duration. What about spectrum? Spectrum is like a picture of sound. That is why we are saying it is the graphic representation of a complex waveform showing the fundamental frequency, the individual harmonics, as well as the amplitudes of each of these. Spectrum is often used in speech analysis to see what a sound looks like. So this is an example of a spectrum. It is the graphical representation of a waveform. So these are the physical properties of sounds once they are produced. And the study of these physical properties of sound is what is called acoustic phonetics. Now that we are done with articulatory phonetics, acoustic phonetics, it is left with auditory phonetics. This is where we shift our focus from how sound is produced or measured to how it is actually heard and understood by the listener. Let us match the technical features of sound to how we experience them. First of all, let's talk about frequency. You would probably ask that, wasn't frequency part of the physical properties of sound in the previous slide when we did acoustic phonetics? Of course, frequency was a physical property of sound. But here, how is frequency perceived in auditory phonetics? In auditory phonetics, frequency is perceived as the pitch of voice. So the higher the frequency, the higher the pitch that we hear. But what is the meaning of pitch? Pitch is the auditory property of sound that allows a listener to place it on a scale from low to high. So due to the frequency, you can have low pitch or high pitch. In auditory phonetics, when frequency reaches the ear, it is perceived as the pitch of the voice. So in simple words, we can say that pitch is what helps us to say whether a sound is high or low. For example, compare a child's voice to an adult's. Children usually speak with a higher pitch, which means the sound waves they produce have higher frequency. The higher the frequency, the higher the pitch we hear. We also know intensity from acoustic phonetics. In auditory phonetics, intensity is perceived as the loudness of sound. So loudness is an auditory property, and it helps the listener to place the sound on a scale, going from a sound that is soft to a sound that is loud. A whisper has low intensity and sounds very soft, while a shout has high intensity and sounds very loud. We also know duration. In auditory phonetics, Duration is perceived as the length of a sound. So the length is the amount of time a vowel or a consonant or a syllable sounds. For instance, the vowel in beat is longer than the vowel in bit. That difference in length helps us understand meaning. Next, we know spectrum from acoustic phonetics. In auditory phonetics, spectrum is seen as the specific quality of sound which makes it different from other sound. In auditory phonetics, spectrum is not just the graphical representation of sounds. It is about what makes a sound different from another sound. For example, the difference between the vowel sounds in the word ship and sheep comes down to sound quality. So this sound quality is shaped by the sound's unique set of frequencies and harmonics. This is what we term as spectrum in auditory phonetics. So this branch is all about the listener's experience, how we make sense of what we hear. This brings us to the end of this lesson. So to sum up, phonetics is the study of speech sounds, how we produce them, how they travel through the air, and how we hear them. We looked at three main areas, that is, the articulatory phonetics, how speech sounds are produced. Also, acoustic phonetics, the physical properties of sounds. And the last one, auditory phonetics, that is, how we hear and understand sounds. Pause the video, write down these questions and try to answer them based on the information given you in the lesson. If you haven't subscribed to our channel, kindly do so that you don't miss the next upload. In our next lesson, we are going to talk about speech sounds in English and their representation.